Hello, and welcome back to the Atlas Agency's continuing investigation of the Path to Carcosa cycle for Arkham Horror the card game. I'm your host, Brandon, and I'm back today with a look at the 12 new player cards in the Pallid Mask, Mythos Pack number 4 in the Carcosa cycle. Hope you enjoy! There are two big themes that run through the Pallid Mask's player cards. First off, we have 4 new level 0 skill cards. Every class except for Survivor gets one of those. And secondly, we have 6 cards that are upgrades on previous cards, many of them cards from the game's core set. The pack also has 2 new cards that don't fall into either of those two categories, so let's start by talking about those 2 misfit cards. Survivor is the one class that doesn't get a new level 0 skill in this pack. Maybe that's because the next pack, Black Star's Rise, has a skill focus for its 2 Survivor cards. Instead, they get a level 0 event in this pack, Waylay. This is an event that costs 3 resources. Tactic: choose an exhausted, non-elite enemy at your location and test Agility X, where X is that enemy's evade value. If you succeed, defeat that enemy. So you can automatically defeat a non-elite enemy by evading it one way or the other, and then playing this and passing an evade test. This seems like an amazing card for Wendy. If you pair it with Stray Cat, then you only have to succeed at 1 skill test to get rid of any non-elite enemy completely. And with Wendy's Amulet or the skill Resourceful, she may be able to do this multiple times per scenario. I'm not sure that any of the other investigators are going to want this. Out of the characters who can take it, Wendy has the highest evade and also the most need for it, but it's great for her to have an evade trick that permanently deals with the enemy rather than just putting it off for later. Next up, we have a level 1 Guardian event, Mano a Mano. This one costs 0 resources, has the Spirit and Bold traits, play only as your first action, deal 1 damage to an enemy engaged with you. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity. This is our first event with the Bold trait, which I'm guessing is meant to tie in with that play only as your first action requirement. That would make Bold the equivalent of the Priority or Terminal traits in Fantasy Flight's Netrunner LCG. The trait doesn't carry any rules weight on its own, it just kind of ties the cards with this requirement together. I think the card is fine. Test-free damage is usually good, especially on the higher difficulties where taking fewer tests is always better. I see this as fitting best with Zoe. Together with her Cross, you could handle a 2 health enemy without a test, or even a 3 health enemy if you've also got Beat Cop out. So those are the 2 odd ducks in this pack. Let's move on now to the new skill cards, starting with Inspiring Presence, another Guardian card. Inspiring Presence has 1 icon for each of 3 different skills. That's a pattern that we'll see in 3 of the 4 skill cards in this pack. This one covers Willpower, Intellect, and Combat. It has the Innate trait. If this skill test is successful, ready an ally asset at your location and heal 1 damage or 1 horror from it. I've already talked about this card back in a video I did when the Pallid Mask was first announced. I believe back then we may not have known about David Renfield yet, but that is one deck type that's emerged that also takes advantage of Inspiring Presence. I've not had a chance to play that myself, but by readying Renfield with this, you can get a second use out of his resource gaining ability in a turn, or 3 uses if you're Ashcan Pete and you could ready him again with your ability. I do want to try one of those builds out, but I still like Inspiring Presence for its most obvious use, which is with a level 2 Beat Cop to let you reuse its damage dealing ability a second time and around. Note also, this card depicts Leo Anderson, who is currently popularly speculated to be the Guardian investigator that we'll see in the next deluxe box. Don't know if that'll pan out or not, but that's kind of the direction that it looks like it should go, since it's set in the kind of setting that's depicted on this card, actually. The Seeker skill is Eureka. This one covers Intellect, Willpower, and Agility. It's innate. If this skill test is successful, the investigator performing this test searches the top 3 cards of his or her deck for a card, draws it, and shuffles his or her deck. It's always good to have another card with an exclamation mark in the name for my overacting Lola theme deck, which is not a real thing yet. I think this is a pretty good min card. Her ability can negate the drawback that it only gives you +1 to the test. One advantage this has over the draw card skills from the core set is that Eureka protects you against drawing a weakness. I just had a game of Pallid Mask the other day where I lost because I committed an overpower to a test, passed it by more than 2, so I didn't need the overpower in the first place, and then because I passed, I drew a card from overpower, and it turned out to be a weakness card, and it was one that resulted in fatal damage. So that's one extra reason why being able to pick the card you draw out of 3 options is nice. The rogue skill is Watch This, which I just noticed has another one of those exclamation marks. This one covers willpower, combat, and agility. It's a gambit skill. Commit only to a skill test you're performing. As an additional cost to commit Watch This to a skill test, spend up to 3 resources. If you succeed by 1 or more, gain twice that many resources. I get a Keanu Reeves vibe from this one. I like the card. The cards it makes me think of are Uncage the Soul and Ever Vigilant from the Path to Carcosa Deluxe box, just in that it's a class-specific option that may replace Emergency Cash. Uncage the Soul compressed that 3 resource gain into a spell-playing action. Ever Vigilant was similar, but it spread that discount out over 3 different assets. This card doesn't really mimic those, but it does let you get up to 3 resources on the back of another action. You do have to have 3 resources to gamble first, and there's a risk that you'll fail the test or not succeed by enough. It's not just passing, but passing by 1 or more, so that basically counteracts the icon that you get from committing Watch This itself. But I can see this replacing Emergency Cash for some rogue decks in the same way that Uncage the Soul replaced Emergency Cash for Agnes for me. A lot of others also have mentioned that this works with Double or Nothing, allowing you to get a net gain of 6 resources, so that's kind of cool as well. Our final skill is Torrent of Power. This is the Mystic one. Unlike the other 3, it does not follow that pattern of having 1 icon in each of 3 different skills. Instead, it has 1 printed wild icon, plus it says, as an additional cost to commit Torrent of Power to a skill test, spend up to 3 charges from among assets you control. For each charge spent in this way, Torrent of Power gains 1 willpower icon and 1 wild icon. So this lets you give up charges from assets you have in play in exchange for a big skill boost. For a willpower test, this could be up to +7 if you spend the max of 3 charges, or +4 for a non-willpower test. I think the card is pretty interesting. If I'm Agnes Baker and I'm running just 2 copies of Shriveling and 2 copies of Rite of Seeking for my spell assets, which is what I usually have with her, then I'm probably not going to want to siphon off any charges to power this. However, with Akachi, I'm already going to be running extra spell assets, just have charges for her signature weakness and her signature asset. So I like the idea of having a second purpose for those Alchemical Transmutation or Song of the Dead charges. Same with Marie Lambeau. I'm usually running some extra spell assets with her just to try to have more spells that I can use her free action on. So I'm interested to try this out and see if it works well for those characters. Sometimes I have a hard time breaking away from Agnes, so I like the idea that this might work better for those non-Agnes Mystic characters. We'll move now to the upgrade cards. There are 6 of these, 4 of them upgrade cards that were in the core set. The other 2 are cards from the Dunwich Legacy cycle. We'll start with the Guardian upgrade, which is on First Aid, a card that originally appeared in the core set. We have now a level 3 version of First Aid. The card adds a willpower icon to the original. It has gone from 3 supplies to 4 supplies, whereas before it healed 1 damage or 1 horror from an investigator at your location. It now heals 1 damage and 1 horror, and it also has the option of targeting not just investigators but also ally assets at your location. The original First Aid was pretty weak. I think it's one of the first cards that ends up on the chopping block, even when you're building with just 2 core sets. But I think getting 2 points of healing for 1 action instead of just 1 point of healing is enough to push this into viable territory. Being able to patch up a Beat Cop to get some more use out of its ability is nice as well. So tentative thumbs up for me for First Aid level 3. For Seekers, we have a level 2 version of Shortcut. Shortcut made its debut in the Dunwich Legacy Deluxe box, and it's a card that I really like. Now we have a version that's basically on steroids. This one costs 1 resource, it's fast, play only during your turn, attached to your location, attached location gains fast trigger, exhaust shortcut, move to a connecting location. So the resource cost goes up by 1, but now it sticks around on the location, and it can be used once per round by any investigator. Even if you just get 1 extra use out of this, I think that's well worth paying the 1 resource, but in any scenario with a central hub location that you'll be visiting repeatedly over the course of the game, I think that this card is going to be amazing. I have a feeling this is going to see a lot of use. Some scenarios it may be more difficult to use than others. Like I said, the ideal spot is some kind of central hub, but again, even when it's not the best case scenario, I think it's still useful. This will also be nice for the Seeker Investigator who's been previewed for the next Deluxe box, who has a movement-related power. The Mystic class gets an upgraded version of Scrying. This is a core set card. Keeps the same resource cost, 1 resource. Now has a second intellect icon. The previous version just had 1. Still uses 3 charges. Fast trigger, exhaust Scrying, and spend 1 charge to look at the top 3 cards of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. Return them to the top of that deck in any order. If a terror or omen card is among the looked at cards, take 1 horror. I think people have had some difficulty spotting what the difference or the benefit of this one is. They see that horror penalty that's added on there, but they don't notice that this has changed from requiring an action to trigger to now being a fast trigger. So that's, I think, a pretty meaningful improvement on Scrying. I've tried to use the level 0 Scrying in the past in solo play as encounter deck control, basically pushing away any of the cards that I'm not equipped to deal with. And because it took an action each time it was used, that was difficult to make work. This does fix that problem. It is kind of unfortunate, though, that this is level 3, since that pushes it out of range for Daisy, who I think could have benefited from this. I believe she's the main character that I had tried to use the original Scrying with. We have a level 2 version of A Chance Encounter. This card originally appeared at level 0 back in Where Doom Awaits in the previous cycle. This one costs X resources. Choose an ally asset with printed resource cost X in any player's discard pile. Put that asset into play under your control. So where the original version of this card just brought the ally back temporarily for a fixed cost of 1 resource till the end of the round, this version keeps them around, maybe not permanently, but at least for as long as they can survive. Because it only lasted for the round, that original version lent itself to manipulating allies with comes into play effects, which I have to say I really enjoyed doing, spamming Art Student especially. So I'm honestly not too excited by this version because I find the level 0 version of the card more interesting overall. One nice thing that this does do is allow Ashcan Pete to replay Duke if he's destroyed. That is nice, especially given my track record in keeping Duke alive. I think, though, that this is my least favorite card in this pack. Rogues get an upgrade to one of their core set weapons, 41 Derringer. This is a level 2 version that has a couple of differences from the original. First, it has an agility icon added to it. Second, the fight action has been changed in 2 ways. Still gives you +2 combat for the attack, but now if you succeed by 1 or more, the attack deals +1 damage. Used to be you had to succeed by 2 or more. It's also got an extra sentence added that says once per turn, if you succeed by 3 or more, you may take an additional action this turn. Back in the Essex County Express expansion, we got Switchblade level 2, which was, for 2 experience points, basically strictly better than the original level 0 Derringer, outside of cards that care about the melee and firearm traits. Switchblade 2 is cheaper to play, has the fast keyword, and doesn't require ammo. Now we have some competition in that 2 experience rogue weapon slot. I think this is going to be a good option. I like that the damage bonus threshold has been lowered. That's one edge it has over Switchblade 2. That's maybe not as exciting as the extra action thing, but honestly it might be the more impactful of the 2 changes to the card, especially since a lot of our rogues have base combat skills of just 3. Makes it that much more likely that you're going to be able to trigger that damage bonus. And finally, the last card in the pack is an upgrade on the neutral card, Emergency Cash. This is a level 3 version. It's actually our second upgrade on Emergency Cash. There was a level 2 version back in the Dunwich cycle that just added a card draw to its effect. This version takes a different path. There's no card draw, but it does add an extra resource, so now you're gaining 4 instead of 3. Plus, it gives you the option of taking the gain or part of the gain as supply tokens on assets at your location instead. To me, that's a lot more interesting than what the level 2 version offered. I think the best cards to pair this with at the moment are going to be Lockpicks and Strange Solution Acidic Ichor. That's 4 extra attacks if you're using the weapon version of Strange Solution. This works with upgraded First Aid too that we looked at a little bit ago. There's also a few other cards that use supply tokens like Flashlight that aren't quite as exciting to refill, but could be useful from time to time. I think that's one of the nice things about this card is the flexibility. If you don't need those supply tokens, or if you maybe only need a couple of them, then you can take any of the remainder as resource gain instead. So that's Emergency Cash level 3. And there you have it, the 12 new player cards from the Pallid Mask. As always, thanks for watching, and good luck in your own investigations of the Path to Carcosa. And for more Arkham stuff, remember that you can visit the Atlas Agency WordPress over at atlasofarkham.wordpress.com. Thanks again.